After all the uncertainty around Warner Brothers, its games division, and what exactly was happening with the next big Harry Potter game, we finally have something concrete. Warner Brothers has confirmed that they are now working on Hogwarts Legacy 2. Finally. The company mentioned the game in the latest letter to shareholders while talking about the future of Warner Brothers and its big brands. Basically, they're saying that games remain a very important growth lever for the company, and Warner Brothers expects them to contribute more meaningfully to profitability of the company as their pipeline expands. And apparently this pipeline is now officially includes the second installment of Hogwarts Legacy. Warner Brothers also reiterated once again that their strategy is focused right now on what they're calling 4 key $1 billion plus franchises. And from their earlier remarks, it's probably safe to assume that they're talking about DC, Game of Thrones, Harry Potter, and Mortal Kombat. Unfortunately, that's pretty much where the details stop. We still don't know what Hogwarts Legacy 2 actually looks like, when it's coming, what the story actually is, or really anything else. So the future of this franchise still remains a little bit of a mystery. But after the smashing success of the first game, which sold more than 12 million units and generated $850 million in revenue during its first few weeks, and surpassed 40 million units in total, the sequel was pretty much guaranteed. Especially since the rest of their lineup, well, they're not doing that great. Game of Thrones seems to have become more of a staple mobile franchise, as pretty much every attempt at making a big traditional game out of it has turned out into a little bit of a mess, and that's being generous. DC is probably still recovering from the entire Suicide Squad situation, and that side of the business in general still seems to be figuring itself out. That leaves only Mortal Kombat, and that's probably the only other IP at Warner Brothers that still feels like a consistently stable earner and performer. But fighting games like this, well, they have their own ceiling, and there is only so much you can squeeze out of them, which leaves Hogwarts Legacy as arguably the biggest asset Warner Brothers has. So of course they need to keep developing it. Now there is one big asterisk over all this. Warner Brothers is still in the middle of that major Paramount acquisition, so this confirmation doesn't necessarily guarantee that the exact version of this game being worked on today is eventually going to be released. A lot can still happen. But at the very least, Warner Brothers is publicly acknowledging how valuable this IP is and confirming that something else is being made on that front. And I don't know if you played the original Hogwarts Legacy, but it is amazing, especially if you're already into the world. I mean, even my partner played it, and she's not a big gamer in general. I mean, yeah, sure, it could have been bigger, the quests could have been less tedious, but overall, it's probably the best Harry Potter game out there. So I'm personally very excited to see what's next. I just have one ask. Please add Quidditch to the game, I beg you guys. Speaking of sequels, it looks like after Insomniac is done with Wolverine, they might be heading straight back to our friendly neighborhood superhero, who does whatever a spider can. As according to recent reports, Spider-Man 3 might already be in development. Now this whole thing started when some fans noticed an IMDb listing for the game a few weeks ago. Obviously, a listing like this is not the same as Sony coming out and officially announcing the game, but it's not nothing, and the page does have a few interesting details. For example, it lists game directors who worked on the previous Spider-Man games. In the cast section we see Yuri Lowenthal, who is apparently returning as Peter Parker, and probably most interestingly, the project status is listed as in production. So there is that. Of course, Sony hasn't officially announced anything yet. But I think that they just don't want Spider-Man 3 to draw attention away from Wolverine. When you have this huge game that you are trying to launch, you really don't want there to be any distractions. So announcing the next game before Wolverine even gets its moment probably doesn't make much sense. So my guess, they wait. They wait till Wolverine is launched, they let it have its moment under the sun, and once that momentum starts calming down, then they will reveal what's coming next. But here's where things gets a little bit more interesting. A few years ago, Insomniac suffered a huge cybersecurity breach where a massive amount of internal materials and plans were leaked. And according to those leaks, Wolverine wasn't exactly supposed to be followed by Spider-Man 3 immediately. The next game was supposed to be a standalone Venom game, then Spider-Man 3, then a new Ratchet & Clank game in between, and finally some unannounced X-Men game. Now, of course, those plans are more than 3 years old at this point, if they were even real in the first place, so things could have changed dramatically, which is why before everyone completely loses their mind over an IMDb page, we should probably wait until Sony actually announces something, preferably with a trailer or two. But at the same time, I mean, come on, we all know that Spider-Man 3 is coming. All the previous games were just excellent. They made a huge amount of money for both Insomniac and Sony, and this is probably the biggest and the most successful superhero gaming franchise on the planet right now. So there is no universe where they just stop making those games. The real question isn't if Spider-Man 3 happens, it's basically a matter of time. But with that, the only thing I'm sad about is that they're probably not going to port it to PC, unfortunately. But well, that's probably my cross to bear as a PC gamer, right? And now on to something more surprising, and I'm not sure if you caught this as it basically came out of nowhere, but Aspyr just shadow dropped the remastered version of the Lord of the Rings War in the North. And apparently, this is only just the beginning. So, let's start with the re-release itself. War in the North suddenly went live on August 11, and if you haven't played this game, I genuinely recommend it. It is an action RPG that originally came out in 2011 where you play as one of 3 characters, a ranger, a dwarf, or an elven mage. And the gist of it is that while Frodo is busy taking the One Ring to Mordor, your group is dealing with another problem. You're trying to stop a second army of Sauron from forming in the north. So basically this side story is happening alongside the main Lord of the Rings adventure. And this story is actually not a bad one. And you meet a lot of familiar characters along the way. And for a game made in 2011, it's a pretty neat hack and slash. I would even say that it's one of the best Lord of the Rings games of that time, and it's now back on modern platforms. But honestly, re-release is not even the most exciting part. What's really interesting is what Aspyr said when it launched. According to the company, this is merely the first project to be released by Aspyr in the Lord of the Rings series, and fans can look forward to even more classic titles to be released in the future. Now that's exciting. Now they didn't say which games they are working on exactly, and that's where things get interesting because there are a lot of candidates. We have the Two Towers, The Return of the King, The Third Age, Conquest, Battle for Middle-earth, and the list goes on. There were a lot of Lord of the Rings games released throughout the early and mid-2000s. And honestly, it's about time Embracer actually starts doing something with this IP. They acquired the extensive rights to the Lord of the Rings IP back in 2022, and personally, I've been waiting ever since to see them really take advantage of it. So yeah, they sure took their sweet time. But starting with these older games is actually a pretty interesting strategy. Think about it, at a roughly $20 price point, they're obviously not expecting War in the North to suddenly generate enormous amounts of money. I mean, at best maybe reimbursing some development costs, maybe contribute a little toward licensing expenses, but I suspect the bigger objective is simply to bring these old games back to life. Make them playable on modern hardware, put them in front of nostalgic players who remember them, and that will create another monetization channel around Lord of the Rings IP, keep people engaged with the franchise, and then suddenly you've got this whole back catalog of games that new and returning players can discover. And if that's the plan, I'm completely on board because I love those old Lord of the Rings games. And if Aspyr eventually gets around to something like Conquest or Battle for Middle-earth, I'll be happy as a clam. But what about you? Is there any Lord of the Rings game from that era that you are looking forward to? Because now is the time to point Aspyr toward them. Now, speaking of giant catalogs, let's talk about Take-Two. And if you were thinking that they only have GTA 6 in their pipeline, well, that's just not the case. Because according to their recent numbers, this whale of a company has almost 30 projects in development right now. Well, 29 to be exact. And according to their latest earnings report, their current pipeline includes 3 mobile titles, 8 sports games, 3 core new IPs, and 15 releases based on their existing ones. And even that last group breaks down even further. Those 15 projects, they include 8 sequels and 7 remakes, remasters, or major platform extensions. Which is kind of ridiculous when you think about it. I mean, 29 games, just think about it. That's crazy. And a lot of these games haven't even been announced yet. And obviously this is only a snapshot of what's currently in development, and as we all know, things can easily be delayed, cancelled, and plans can always change. But even for a company as big as Take-Two, 29 projects is pretty impressive. And from a game production perspective, I think they definitely need that scale. Because as enormous as GTA 6 is going to be, even the project of that size cannot sustain this company for long. I mean, the company has almost 13,000 employees, and they spent more than $1 billion in R&D expenses alone. That's a gigantic machine that needs revenue to keep running. And of course, obviously not all of these 29 projects are going to be profitable. Some will definitely underperform, and some might never even make it out. But games like GTA 6, NBA, and other big 2K franchises, for example, those are probably going to continue doing very well. And having this many projects gives Take-Two more opportunities to monetize their existing audience. I mean, we all know that GTA 6 is going to be a big event, but it will eventually die down. And that's when these projects will become even more important. And so far, Take-Two seems to be one of the few companies, especially of that scale, that's actually doing pretty well for itself. And you don't get to say that very often these days, especially in game development. And now let's talk about Netflix, and we'll start with the unexpected because, well, I was wrong. Just when I thought Netflix might have finally figured out what its niche in gaming was supposed to be, the streaming giant has decided to shut down 2 more studios. According to GameFile, out of the blue, Netflix decided to shut down Los Angeles-based Night School Studios and plans to close Helsinki-based Moonloot Games. And unfortunately, that's not the end of it. The company is also planning additional layoffs across its gaming division as a whole, but they decided not to disclose how many employees were affected. And this whole situation is very bizarre to me, and there are at least a couple of reasons. First, Night School Studio was actually the first game studio Netflix ever acquired. So this isn't some random studio that they acquired when gaming was booming. It was part of their original push into the business. And the second, this is happening only a few months after the release of its latest game, Unhinged. If you don't remember what it is, it's that 2-hour-long horror game where you use your phone as a controller. So what is Netflix actually doing? Well, officially it looks like the company is shifting gears. Again. The new focus of the company is apparently going to be games for kids, party games, and more mainstream narrative projects. And really all of this comes down to just one thing: retention. Netflix leadership seems to believe those specific types of games can meaningfully improve the retention on their platform as a whole. And at the end of the day, that's the metric this company cares about the most. And it also looks like Netflix is moving away from the traditional mobile game approach, and instead wants to focus more heavily on games you can play on TVs and PCs through its streaming platform. I mean, ever since their entire game division was formed, they struggled with strategy, with its approach, with figuring out their niche to begin with, and just understanding what Netflix games actually is. Of course, it doesn't mean that they suddenly stop offering games on their platform, but it's a big shift. What seems more likely is that Netflix continues commissioning games externally and then distributes those games through its platform, instead of trying to own and operate this huge permanent development organization itself. And that's a shame, and I'm not only saying that because I was wrong, but because Netflix as a company had so much potential when they just got into video games. I mean, Netflix had money, platform, and reach to potentially do something genuinely interesting here. Instead, they seem to have bitten off more than they could chew, destroyed more than a few indie studios in the process, and then just walked away. So, I don't know, maybe next time just leave those poor studios alone. And lastly, let's wrap up on a positive note and talk about Embracer Group, as they have a surprising number of sequels in development. And apparently we're going to see some of the biggest ones sometime before March 2028. According to Embracer's latest Q1 financial report, they plan to release the new Darksiders 4 and a new Kingdom Come game sometime in the fiscal year 27. So roughly speaking, we're talking about a release window between April 2027 to March 2028. Another interesting detail is that the next Kingdom Come game does not have a platform list attached to it yet, but I think it's pretty reasonable to assume that it will end up looking similar to Darksiders, which means PC, PlayStation 5 and Xbox. But before we even get to those two games, Embracer has plenty of other stuff lined up. There is Metro 2039, Tomb Raider Legacy of Atlantis, Warhammer 40k Dawn of War 4, and then you have projects that doesn't even have a release date yet. Things like the new Lord of the Rings open world RPG, or remasters like Deus Ex and Thief the Dark Project. So yeah, it looks like Embracer is pretty busy right now. But out of everything on that list, there is one project that I personally find the most exciting and, well, the riskiest, and it's Darksiders 4. Because, I mean, if you look at all the other games, there's at least a clear business case behind most of them. Some already have these massive audiences that are going to show up regardless of whether the game is good or bad, like Kingdom Come or Warhammer 40k. Then you have projects with lower financial expectations than your typical AAA titles, like all these remasters. And then you have games that just keeps getting momentum, like the Metro series. But Darksiders is a little bit different from all of them. At least according to the official information, the last game in the series managed to recoup its development and marketing investments, but beyond that, I really couldn't find any indications that it was some enormous success. And despite Darksiders technically being a pretty mass market action game, the franchise itself still feels much more niche, which is exactly why I'm so interested in this one, because personally, I like those games. I think the setting is fantastic, I think the action is great, and the first two games, they were just chef's kiss. But merely performing okay for its audience is not enough anymore. This isn't exactly what shareholders are looking for right now. They want massive hits, games capable of generating hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. So Gunfire Games has a pretty difficult job here. Darksiders 4 can't just satisfy the people who already love Darksiders. It has to prove that this franchise can become relevant again to a much larger audience. And in the current state of the industry, that's a pretty tough ask. But I'm honestly rooting for them. And that's all I have for you guys so far. Let me know what do you think about all these exciting projects we've talked about today, like Spider-Man 3, new Lord of the Rings remasters, or Hogwarts Legacy 2. Let me know what are you looking forward to the most. And with that, Alex is signing off for today. Cheers!